The Forest Temple is an icon like no other. It's also probably the temple that Nintendo needs to be by far more careful with, based on how it is one of the best Zelda dungeons of all time, and with the track record, especially from Tears of the Kingdom, we are skeptical when it comes to turning the Forest Temple into a brand new 3D dungeon and dropping the icon from 1998. The entrance to this temple is just so iconic. You reach to the point where you learn Saria's song for the first time in the child section of the game. No Saria, instead you meet Sheik again, teaches you the Minuet of the Forest. Point your hookshot, make your way into this icon, and you hear the theme. You haven't even entered the temple yet, and those two wolfers attacking you. Like, I feel like this section going into there with also the Skulltula as soon as you open the door coming down, it should say exactly the same. The whole vines that you climb to get through to get the first key, all of that should not be messed with. I feel like everything in this dungeon, at least up until the first mini boss, this is the interesting thing about the Forest Temple, they recycle the mini boss twice in this temple, and it's just Stalfos who you battle, and to the point that the second mini boss fight where you finally get the bow is just fighting two Stalfos. If they can change something there, maybe creating something more iconic of a mini-boss. Like, yes, the Stalfos is tied very closely with the Lost Woods, but why have it twice? You can replace one of those fights with a new mini-boss.
We do have two Stalfos, but at the end, when you think they're done, their bones form together to make a bigger Stalfos. I think Nintendo should pay me for that idea.
This is the adult dungeon that has best pacing. You have the whole indoor sections, you have the courtyard, you have the falling ceiling. Like, you can't mess with falling ceiling and the twisted corridor in this remake. Like, taking those two out, you don't have the Forest Temple anymore.
There's just so much about this temple that just should not be changed. But of course, when we're thinking about the Ocarina of Time remake, I think a lot about how this place is gonna look, because there's some areas in the outdoors, it still looks kind of indoors, but it's mostly outdoors. They have like these beautiful lights like coming through like the ceiling. They have like natural lighting in there, not just lighting that just bakes in out of nowhere, depending on if this game has ray tracing or not. It doesn't need to have ray tracing to look good, let's just say that. But thinking of all the vegetation that will be there, it's going to look really nice, like the one in Twilight Princess, which now we're gonna see something like this in 4K at 60 frames per second. It's gonna look stunning. I can't wait to see especially how that twisted corridor looks.
We haven't really gotten a taste of a Forest Temple, as you mentioned, in a very long time. Last time in 3D, it was Skyward Sword. The Forest Temple of Twilight Princess is a good example there, but still, that temple is very long, and it represents a good example of what the Forest Temple shouldn't be. It shouldn't be ruining the pacing of the dungeon experience in Ocarina of Time. Not long before the Twisted Corridor, you have that whole labyrinth section where you have to push this block around in order to make your way up to the chamber that will open up towards the twisted corridor. And the whole twist of not being able to do anything about it until you have the bow, I think those are the examples here. Like, the weaker part of the dungeon, that's where you can do certain changes. The strong suits, and this is something I feel like the team also making this remake needed to go over, is quite simple. Which sections of these dungeons are total icons and which are more sluggish? Which can we change? Because I feel also like the pose section is hard to mess with, especially the one that involves using the bow and arrow. Maybe they could change the puzzle bit so that is a fresh experience. So same, but with elements of freshness.
We've seen in past Zelda remasters, not remakes, but we've seen how far little changes can go. Skyward Sword HD, like that intro went by way faster simply because the text speed was faster and Fi did not talk as much. It's something they also did in Twilight Princess HD was make the climbing faster. Maybe they could also make pushing blocks, like you mentioned in that one puzzle. Maybe that can also be faster.
You need to just avoid adding filler sections that just feel like tedious padding, as we've seen in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. Only enhance those sections that were tedious in the first place. There's just so much great stuff in this temple, especially before you get the bow, but also especially after you get the bow. Part where you gradually make your way down from the top all the way to the very bottom. It is important to remember that this is also the first temple in Ocarina of Time where the wall masters show up. Some say, oh, the forest temple isn't big enough. I strongly disagree. I feel like this temple has the exact size that you would expect from a temple in the forest. Even looking at the layout of this place, it is already almost the size of Hyrule Castle. So this is why I'm saying don't make it longer, just make the more sluggish sections more exciting so that you have highs all the way throughout this.
Yeah, the Zelda team has been really good about improving the pacing of their previous Zelda games with their remasters, and I have full faith that they're going to do the same thing with Ocarina of Time Remake. What I find interesting is that this is going to be like the first Zelda game in a while that we don't get the bow and arrow until much, much later. Traditionally in 3D Zelda games before the open era, you would get the bow and arrow like pretty late into the game, so it's got to feel really rewarding to get the bow.
The good thing about the whole bow situation is that you have the slingshot, obviously, and that is also the case in Skyward Sword. There you also don't get the bow until even later in the game. It should still be the great reward of the Forest Temple as one of the most iconic items that you get, along with the hookshot, obviously before after racing Dumper. One thing I definitely don't want to see with this remake is them removing the elements that we absolutely adore in traditional 3D Zelda. That is obviously the map, gaining the map of the temple. Technically you already had that also in the temples of Breath of the Wild, but there you got it right away. You didn't even need to find it. And especially not taking away the boss key, because I just don't see how they could take out the boss key as well, because it is what the dungeon builds up to. You get the boss key and then you backtrack to the section, or in the case of the Forest Temple, just make your way back to the main chamber where you have to face the final, say, mini boss in the case of the final Post Sister, and then twist around the whole bottom floor in order to make your way into the boss chamber. Here I'm a little bit concerned because we all know what happened with Majora's Mask 3D. They messed with the bosses by adding those stupid eyes outside of the face of the moon. That is definitely the most controversial change they made in Majora's Mask 3D. So how do you think they will handle bosses?
I gotta think that they heard the feedback of Majora's Mask 3D and understood that people did not like those eyes. My only hope is that they do listen and they don't do something as blatantly obvious and handholdy as that.
Yeah, let's go into Phantom Ganon. This boss is just perfect as it is. It is the perfect setup to the final boss, and it really depends on if they are changing the final battle against Ganondorf to not just be a tennis match or rematch, since the first match you have is with Phantom Ganon in the Forest Temple. What do you think, Joey? You think that they will mess with that tennis match, or even the paintings themselves?
I don't know if they will. It's just so baked into like the experience of these boss battles. Like that's the only way it can be stunned, pretty much, if I recall. I just remember how cool it was playing it and seeing him come through like the paintings. Nintendo loved their paintings in Nintendo 64 era. We're talking Mario 64 and we're talking this boss battle.
Ocarina of Time almost ended up as a painting-based game as well. Luckily,
it did. But yeah, it was also kind of creepy watching him come out of those paintings. So I hope there's a way they can kind of match that eeriness, that creepiness to it.
Yeah, what also makes this fight so iconic is, you enter this chamber, you think, oh, nothing is happening, I'm gonna exit, and then the gate goes up, and you have Phantom Ganon coming out on horseback. Of course, you just target Phantom Ganon before he makes his way and uses lightning against you in the paintings, but they could change the order so that you get thrown off, so that it's different from what it's been in the previous versions.
It'd be something that would be a clever way to shake things up without completely changing how a boss battle is designed.
Exactly, and maybe even adding a final stage where you actually have to battle him on horseback instead of just floating in the air and doing the tennis match. But after slaying down the Phantom, you of course are reunited with Saria, and question is, will they address that the sages are dead?
I mean, it's an easy thing to add into the dialogue, but I also like to think that Nintendo thinks we're smart, and it could be implied heavily that they died in battle.
Yeah, I think that too. And then, of course, you don't leave immediately Kokiri Forest as you're sent down there, because we have the Deku Tree Sprout coming out and adding first a very charming moment and then a very dark one, revealing the identity of the Hero of Time, namely that you are not a Kokiri, you are the son of Hylians who unfortunately perished in the Hyrulean Civil War, adding another layer of motivation to take down the self-proclaimed king of evil, Ganondorf.
I really hope, it probably won't happen and I won't be that disappointed, but I really hope they show us something like that in a flashback, like we see Link's mom as carrying him to the Kokiri forest as a baby, and then we see her die in front of the Deku tree. That would make for a really good emotional moment.
Yes, please. Absolutely. And I feel like that is a very fitting moment to conclude this first dungeon-specific episode of Inside Ocarina of Time Remake. If you have anything to share about your expectations for the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time Remake, then be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and press the notification bell. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching, and to all our patreon.com/CommonRealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to our heroes, as we are playing as the hero of time, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You rock, and please enjoy these awesome videos.